A cruel millionaire does everything to drive an old man off his own land. But when the threat approaches, a retired police horse does something no one ever imagined. The sun rose lazily over the outskirts of Riverdale, Missouri, bathing the pastures of Hope Ranch in gold. Jack sat on the wooden porch, feeling the morning warmth on his wrinkled face. His eyes, clouded by the blindness that had afflicted him 5 years ago, could no longer see the horizon. But all his other senses compensated for his lack of vision. The aroma of damp earth, the bird song, and the unmistakable sound of approaching hooves brought him a sense of peace. "Titan, my old friend, you've come to wish me good morning," murmured Jack, extending his calloused hand to receive the velvety muzzle of the imposing black horse. The animal, nearly 17 years old, had been one of the most respected in the St. Louis Mounted Police. Now retired, he had found in Jack not just an owner, but a companion in solitude. Since Cindy, Jack's wife, had passed after a long illness, it had been just the two of them at the ranch. "Let's have some coffee, partner. Then we need to check that fence on the north side." "Frank mentioned it was loose," said Jack, rising with the help of his cane. With sure, memorized steps, the old man crossed the porch, entered the simple but well-kept house, and went straight to the kitchen. His movements were precise, the result of years living in the same house and his determination to maintain his independence despite his blindness. He prepared coffee in the iron kettle and cut some slices of fresh cheese that Frank had brought the day before. Frank was a young man in his early 20s, the son of Jack's former neighbors. Since childhood, he had frequented the ranch and over time had become the old man's right-hand man. He came 3 times a week to help with the heavier tasks, took Jack to the doctor when necessary, and brought supplies from town. "If it weren't for that boy, I might have ended up in a nursing home by now," Jack sometimes commented to the few friends who still visited him. While having his coffee on the porch, the morning silence was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching. Jack's attentive ears recognized that it was not Frank's old pickup truck. Titan, who had been grazing peacefully near the house, raised his head alertly. The horse always sensed the arrival of strangers even before they reached the ranch gate. "Who could be visiting us so early, Titan?" Jack asked, more to himself than to the animal. The car stopped, and soon Jack heard the sound of the gate opening and firm footsteps approaching on the stone path. "Good morning. Are you Jack Pereira?" asked a male voice, deep and slightly affected. "That's me. And who might you be?" replied Jack, turning his face toward the voice. "Dr. Alan Morrison, pleased to meet you. I'm a businessman with several ventures in the region, and I'd like to discuss something that might interest you." Jack detected an expensive cologne and the sound of a wristwatch when the man moved to extend his hand. Even without seeing, Jack sensed a certain presumption in the way the stranger presented himself. "What would that be, Doctor?" "I don't have much business with city folks," replied Jack, shaking the offered hand. Titan approached with heavy steps, positioning himself near the porch as if evaluating the visitor. Dr. Morrison looked at the animal with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. "What an impressive animal." "Is he tame?" he asked, keeping his distance. "Titan is gentle with those who deserve trust," replied Jack with a half-smile. "But you still haven't told me what brings you to my ranch so early." Dr. Morrison adjusted his jacket and adopted an even more cordial tone. "I've come to make you a proposal, Mr. Jack, a proposal that could change your life. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue." "Change my life?" Jack let out a dry laugh. "Doctor, with all due respect, my life is exactly how I want it." Dr. Alan Morrison didn't seem accustomed to being contradicted. He adjusted his silk tie, a gesture Jack couldn't see but could sense in the man's momentary hesitation. "Mr. Pereira, I'm planning a major development in this region, a high-end residential community that will tremendously increase the value of all surrounding properties," explained Morrison, walking around the porch as if already inspecting a future investment. "Your ranch is strategically located at the center of everything. I've come to offer you a substantial amount for the property." Titan snorted forcefully, shaking his head as if understanding every word from the visitor. The horse took a step forward, placing himself between Jack and the businessman, who instinctively backed away. "This horse doesn't seem to like me much," commented Morrison, trying to maintain his composure. "Titan has good judgment of character," replied Jack calmly, stroking the animal's neck. "As for your proposal, Doctor, I appreciate the interest, but this ranch is not for sale." Morrison took a deep breath, clearly disappointed with the direct response. "Mr. Pereira, with your condition, wouldn't it be more comfortable to live in town? A modern apartment with all the amenities. You could hire a full-time nurse, have access to better doctors." Jack stood up, leaning on his cane. Even with his 70-some years and blindness, his posture commanded respect. "My condition, as you call it, doesn't make me incapable. I live quite well here. I know every inch of this land. This is where I built my life with Cindy, where I spent the best and worst moments. I have no interest in trading that for city conveniences." Before Morrison could insist, the sound of an approaching pickup truck interrupted the conversation. Titan visibly relaxed, recognizing the vehicle. "Mr. Jack!" Frank's youthful voice echoed from outside. The tall, thin young man with his disheveled curly hair under a worn cap entered through the gate carrying 2 grocery bags. He stopped upon seeing the elegant visitor. "Sorry, I didn't know you had company." "Don't worry, Frank, this is Dr. Alan Morrison. Dr. Morrison, this is Frank, my assistant and practically a son to me." The 2 men briefly greeted each other. Frank, always observant, immediately noticed the tension in the air. "Is everything all right, Mr. Jack?" "Everything's fine, son. Dr. Morrison was just leaving. He came to make me a proposal I can't accept." The businessman attempted a smile, extending a card to Frank. "Perhaps you need time to think it over. Here's my card. Please call me if you change your mind. My offer is truly generous." Frank took the card with some suspicion and put it in his pocket. "Thank you for your visit, Doctor, but, as I said, I'm not interested," Jack reaffirmed. After Morrison's departure, Frank helped Jack sit down again in the rocking chair on the porch. "What did he want to buy, Mr. Jack?" "The ranch," replied the old man, running his hand over his bald head. "Said he's going to build a luxury development around here." Frank remained silent for a moment, gazing at the horizon where Jack's lands stretched out. "Aren't you curious to know how much he'd offer?" Jack smiled, detecting something in the young man's voice. "Frank, there are things in life that don't have a price. This ranch is one of them. This is where I found peace after Cindy passed, where I gave Titan a home. How could I sell all this?" The young assistant seemed thoughtful, staring at the horse now grazing calmly. "You're right, Mr. Jack, some things don't have a price." Later that day, while Frank was fixing the fence on the north side, his cell phone vibrated. It was a text message, short and direct. "We need to talk about the old man. Meet me at the hotel tonight, a.m." Frank looked toward the house in the distance where Jack was resting. He hesitated for a moment, then quickly replied, "I'll be there, 8 p.m. Titan watched the young man from a distance, as if sensing something. The horse whinnied, agitated, making Frank shudder slightly. The Riverdale Hotel was the only luxury establishment in the small town. In the bar on the top floor, with a view of the Missouri River, Alan Morrison observed the amber liquid in his whiskey glass, slowly swirling it. The wall clock marked 8:15 when Frank entered the place, visibly out of place with his checkered shirt and faded jeans. "You're late," commented Morrison without raising his eyes. "I had to wait for Mr. Jack to fall asleep. He's a light sleeper," explained Frank, sitting uncomfortably in the leather armchair. "What did you want to talk about?" Morrison raised his gaze, studying the young man before him. "How long have you been working for that old man?" 5 years? 7. Started when I was still in high school. "And how much does he pay you?" Frank shifted uneasily. "Enough. It's not just about the money that I'm there." Morrison smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Noble of you, but what if I offered you 10 times more for a simple job?" Frank's expression darkened. "What kind of job?" "Just help me convince the old man to sell that ranch." "You have influence over him. He trusts you. Why is that land so important to you? There are many properties in the region." Morrison leaned forward, lowering his voice. "That area has a strategic location. Besides, geological studies indicate the presence of an underground spring of excellent quality mineral water. It's worth a fortune, but the old man has no idea. Frank felt a knot form in his throat. And what exactly do you want me to do? Start. Planting the idea that it's dangerous for him to live alone. Mention accidents, robberies targeting elderly people in the area. Make him feel vulnerable. That's manipulation, protested Frank, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. Morrison smiled again, this time pulling an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. I prefer to call it persuasion, and it comes with rewards. He slid the envelope across the table. An advance. There's 10 times that amount when the deal is concluded. Frank looked at the envelope, hesitant. He thought of his sick mother, the expensive medications, the college education interrupted due to lack of funds. Slowly, his hand moved forward and took the envelope. I'm not promising anything, he muttered. Of course not, replied Morrison, finishing his whiskey. I just expect results. The next morning, the ranch awakened with its usual routine. Jack, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, heard Titan's footsteps approaching. The horse was restless, snorting and pawing the ground. What's wrong, old boy? Something bothering you? Asked Jack, extending his hand to touch the animal. At that moment, the sound of Frank's pickup truck was heard. Titan immediately turned toward the sound, ears alert. It was the first time Jack had noticed such a reaction from the horse to the young man's arrival. Good morning, Mr. Jack, greeted Frank, climbing the porch steps. There was a slight tremor in his voice that didn't go unnoticed by the elderly man. Good morning, son. You're early today. Thought I'd finish that fence. By the way, did you hear what happened to Mr. Johnson, the one who lives on the ranch past the river? Jack furrowed his brow. No. What happened? Frank hesitated, choosing his words. His house was broken into the night before last. They took everything of value. He's in the hospital, very shaken. Jack's face paled. Johnson had been his friend for decades, an elderly man like himself. My God, is he all right? He will be, Frank quickly replied. But they say the thieves are targeting isolated properties, especially those of elderly people. Titan whinnied loudly, approaching Jack, more closely, as if wanting to protect him. The horse stared at Frank in a way the young man had never seen before. This horse is acting strange with me today, commented Frank, taking a step back. Jack extended his hand, calming Titan with caresses on his neck. He seems to be sensing something. I've always trusted his instincts. An uncomfortable silence hung between them. Frank quickly changed the subject, offering to prepare lunch while he worked on the fence. As he walked away, he didn't notice that Titan followed him with his gaze, vigilant as never before. After lunch, while Frank was arranging tools in the shed, something caught his attention, a small newspaper clipping pinned to the wall, yellowed with time. It was an article about Titan, the horse that had saved a police officer during a risky operation. The piece highlighted the animal's incredible ability to sense danger and protect his human partners. 3 days had passed since Alan Morrison's visit. The routine at Hope Ranch followed its normal course, but small changes began to appear, almost imperceptible to most, but not to Jack, whose senses had sharpened with the loss of his vision. During breakfast, Jack noticed that Titan was especially agitated, trotting around the house in circles, as he did on stormy days. Strange, he murmured to himself. The sky must be clear. I don't smell rain in the air. He decided to walk around the property, something he did every morning to stay active. With his cane in one hand and the other resting on the fence, Jack followed the path he had memorized over the years. Titan accompanied him at a distance, like a silent guardian. Upon reaching the northern boundary of the property, his cane found an empty space where there should have been continuity in the fence. "What's this?" questioned Jack, feeling the air. "The fence is cut here." He leaned cautiously, touching the ends of the wire. The cut was clean, not appearing to be the work of time or some wild animal. Someone had deliberately cut the fence on his property. A feeling of vulnerability invaded him. Unable to see what was around him, he felt exposed as never before since losing his vision. Titan approached, snorting near his shoulder. You're restless too, aren't you, friend, sensing that something isn't right? In response, the horse tilted, his head offering his neck for Jack to lean on for the way back to the house. That afternoon, Frank arrived bringing supplies and news from town. He found Jack more silent than usual, sitting on the porch with a worried expression. "Any problems, Mr. Jack?" "The fence on the north side was cut, Frank. Not natural wear. Someone deliberately cut it." The young man frowned, an expression of genuine concern on his face. "I'll check that right away. Do you think it could be the work of those thieves who attacked Mr. Johnson?" Jack shrugged, thoughtful. "I don't know. It could be a coincidence, but what, Mr. Jack?" "This started after that Allen fellow's visit. Think that's too much of a coincidence?" Frank swallowed hard, avoiding the old man's gaze, even knowing he couldn't see his expression. "You think a respected businessman would do something like that? Maybe it's just vandals, teenagers looking for fun." "Maybe," replied Jack, not entirely convinced. "Anyway, we need to strengthen security around here." While Frank was fixing the fence, he couldn't shake off the weight of guilt. It wasn't he who had cut the fence, but he knew exactly who had done it. Morrison had made it clear in their last meeting that he would increase pressure on the old man. "Small incidents to make him feel unsafe," the businessman had said. "Nothing that will actually hurt him, just enough to make him realize he needs more protection than an isolated ranch can offer." Upon returning to the house, Frank noticed something strange. The tool shed door was ajar. He was sure he had closed it the day before. Inside the shed, he immediately noticed that several tools were missing: wire cutters, a hammer, a crowbar. Tools that could easily be used to break into a house. "Someone's been here," he murmured to himself, feeling a chill run down his spine. Leaving the shed, he almost collided with Titan, who was watching him intently. The horse maintained a rigid posture, ears pointed forward, dark eyes fixed on him as if they could see beyond his actions to his intentions. "Hey, big guy, it's okay," said Frank nervously, trying to stroke the animal's neck as he always did. For the first time in 7 years, Titan backed away from his touch. The animal took a step back, keeping his head raised in a sign of alertness. "What's with you? Don't you recognize me anymore?" In response, Titan simply turned and trotted toward the house, where Jack was waiting on the porch. That night, as Frank drove back to town, he couldn't get Titan's look out of his head. It was as if the animal knew, as if, somehow incomprehensibly, that horse could see through his betrayal. His cell phone rang, displaying Morrison's name on the screen. "Yes?" Frank answered, his voice trembling. "How are things over there? Is the old man shaken yet?" Frank took a deep breath before answering. He noticed the cut fence. "He's suspicious." "Good. That's just the first phase. Tomorrow we'll take the next step. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue." Morning arrived with a fine drizzle that wrapped Hope Ranch in a cloak of mist. Jack woke to the sound of rain drumming on the roof, a melody that always calmed him. However, the feeling of peace was quickly replaced by the memory of recent events. The cut fence, the missing tools, the strange change in Titan's behavior. "Good morning, old boy," he greeted the horse, who as always approached the porch early. The animal responded with a soft whinny, calmer than in previous days. Frances, an elderly woman who lived nearby and came once a week to help with the heavier cleaning, arrived shortly after. "Mr. Jack, there's a paper pinned to your gate," she informed him as she entered. "Looks like a note." "A note? For me? Who would leave a note at the gate instead of coming to the house?" Frances placed the rain-dampened paper in the old man's hands. "Would you like me to read it to you?" Jack nodded, curious and somewhat apprehensive. "Not all guardians are trustworthy," read Frances, furrowing her brow. "That's it, no signature, nothing." A shiver ran down Jack's spine. What a strange message. What could it mean? "Seems like some kind of warning, Mr. Jack. Are you having trouble with someone?" Jack hesitated. He didn't want to worry Frances, but he also needed to confide in someone. Recently, a businessman came offering money for the ranch, a certain Dr. Allen Morrison. When I refused, he didn't seem very pleased. Francis let out an exclamation of surprise. Alan Morrison, the owner of that conglomerate. He's always in the newspapers buying up land all over the region. Exactly. And after he showed up here, strange things started happening. The cut fence, missing tools. You think he would dare to threaten you? Jack thoughtfully stroked his graying beard. I don't know. He seems like the type who gets what he wants, no matter how. Francis spent the rest of the morning at the ranch, insisting on staying longer than usual. Before leaving, she assured Jack she would return the next day to check if everything was all right. Alone again, the old man sat in the rocking chair on the porch, the enigmatic note still on his mind. Not all guardians are trustworthy. What did that mean? His thoughts were interrupted by the now familiar sound of Frank's pickup truck. Titan, who had been grazing peacefully in the field, abruptly raised his head upon hearing the vehicle, immediately assuming a defensive posture. Good afternoon, Mr. Jack, greeted Frank, climbing the porch steps. There was something different in his voice, a tension that wasn't there before. Frank, something strange happened today. Someone left a note at the gate. The young man took the paper from Jack's hands, reading it silently. His face paled. This looks like a threat, he commented, returning the note. Any idea who might have written it? No, but it started after that businessman showed up. Frank looked away, even knowing that Jack couldn't see him. Guilt was consuming him from within. It wasn't he who had written the note, but he knew it came from someone associated with Morrison. I think you should consider his offer, Frank suggested cautiously. With the money, you could buy a house in town, have more security. Jack turned toward Frank's voice, his eyebrows arched in surprise. You too, Frank. I thought you understood what this ranch means to me. I do understand, Mr. Jack, but I'm worried about your safety. These lands are becoming too valuable, attracting dangerous people. Titan approached the porch at that moment, positioning himself between Jack and Frank, snorting and pawing the ground, clearly agitated. What's gotten into that horse? Questioned Frank, taking a step back. He's never acted like this with me before. Jack extended his hand, touching the animal's flank. He felt the tense muscles beneath the soft hair, the accelerated breathing. Titan seems to be trying to tell me something, murmured Jack. Suddenly, the words from the note echoed in his mind. Not all guardians are trustworthy. A disturbing thought began to form. What if the note wasn't a threat but a warning? But who would be trying to alert him? Frank, you don't need to worry so much about me. I have Titan to protect me, said Jack, trying to gauge the young man's reaction. A horse won't be able to protect you from armed robbers, Mr. Jack, replied Frank with a hint of impatience he had never shown before. This isn't just any horse, retorted Jack calmly. Titan was trained by the police. He senses danger, perceives intentions. Some say he has a sixth sense. Frank swallowed hard, looking nervously at the animal who wouldn't take his eyes off him. I need to go to the shed for that tool to fix the chicken coop roof, said the young man, quickly walking away. When Frank moved away, Titan visibly relaxed, tilting his head to receive Jack's caress. What do you know that I don't, my friend? Whispered the old man into the horse's ear. That night, as Jack fell asleep, he didn't notice the silhouette moving stealthily around the ranch grounds, nor did he hear the click of photos being taken of the property. But Titan noticed. The horse watched attentively from the improvised stall near the house, his ears alert, catching every suspicious sound in the darkness. The heavy clouds that had been gathering since early finally unleashed a furious storm. The Riverdale sky transformed into a dark canvas, occasionally torn by lightning that illuminated Hope Ranch with ghostly flashes. Jack, seated in his armchair in the living room, listened to the howling wind and the drumming of rain on the roof. With the electricity cut off by the storm, the old battery-powered radio was his only company, announcing storm warnings for the entire region. Looks like it's going to be a long night, Titan, he commented to the horse who, exceptionally Jack, had brought inside the house. He had never done this before, but something in his instinct told him that tonight they needed to be together. The animal remained restless, moving from one side to the other in the limited space of the living room, ears constantly alert. What is it, friend? It's just the storm. Jack tried to calm him, though he himself felt an inexplicable apprehension. It was almost 11 at night when the first strange sound was heard, a metallic creak that didn't belong to the symphony of the storm. Jack straightened in his armchair, all his senses on alert. "Did you hear that, Titan?" In response, the horse snorted nervously, pawing the wooden floor. The creak was repeated, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of the gate being forced open. Jack felt his heart rate accelerate. Someone was trying to enter his property in the middle of the night during a storm. Feeling around, he found the cell phone that Frank had insisted he keep nearby. With trembling hands, he tried to dial, but the storm had knocked out the signal. They were isolated. Another crash cut through the night, this time closer to the house. Muffled voices mixed with the noise of the rain. It wasn't just one person, there were several. "Who's there?" shouted Jack, standing up and grabbing his cane, the only defense instrument he had at hand. No response came, only more sounds of footsteps approaching. Titan began to whinny, agitated, moving in increasingly tighter circles around Jack, as if creating a protective barrier. Suddenly, the back door gave way with a dry crack. The sound of wet boots invaded the kitchen. Jack, paralyzed by fear and the helplessness of his condition, gripped his cane tightly. "I don't have anything valuable here," he shouted toward the noises. "Get out of my house." A voice responded, surprisingly familiar. "Mr. Jack, you don't need to be afraid. It's us." "Frank, what are you doing here at this hour?" Before the young man could answer, another voice was heard, deep and authoritative. "Enough beating around the bush. So let's get straight to the point." With horror, Jack recognized Alan Morrison's voice. "What is this? What do you want?" Jack heard footsteps approaching, felt the presence of several people invading his living room. Titan positioned himself, in front of him, snorting threateningly. "You should have accepted my offer when you had the chance, you stubborn old man," said Morrison. "Now we'll do it the hard way. I have sale documents for the property here. You're going to sign them now." "Never!" protested Jack, backing up until he felt the wall behind him. "Frank, how could you do this? I trusted you." The silence that followed was more painful than any response. "Everyone has their price, old man," replied Morrison with disdain, "even your precious assistant." At that moment, Titan charged forward. The sound of his powerful hooves against the wooden floor was like thunder inside the house. A cry of surprise followed by sounds of falling and objects being knocked over. "Control that animal," shouted Morrison. "Look out, he's going to attack," shouted another unfamiliar voice. Chaos erupted in the small living room. Jack, backed against the wall, heard the confusion of sounds. Furniture toppling, glass breaking, men shouting, and above all, Titan's furious whinnies. "Stop this," Frank suddenly shouted. "This wasn't the deal. You said you would just scare him, not hurt." "Him?" "Shut up, kid," retorted Morrison. "You've already got your money. Now stay quiet and let us finish the job." A new sound joined the chaos, police sirens rapidly approaching. "The police!" exclaimed someone. "Who called the police?" "Must have been the neighbors, heard the commotion," replied another voice. "Let's get out of here," ordered Morrison. Jack heard the hurried footsteps of the intruders rushing toward the exit. The sound of sirens was getting closer. "Mr. Jack, I'm sorry." Frank's voice sounded near him, trembling and desperate. "I didn't want things to go this far. It was my mother who called the police. I told her everything this afternoon." Before Jack could respond, he felt Titan approach, the soft muzzle touching his shoulder. The horse was breathing heavily but unharmed. He had protected his owner to the end. The rain continued to fall when the police cruisers arrived at Hope Ranch, their lights cutting through the darkness with blue and red flashes. The house, once a sanctuary of peace, was now a scene of confusion. Overturned furniture, shattered glass scattered across the floor, signs of struggle everywhere. Seated in a kitchen chair with a blanket over his shoulders, Jack was still trembling. Not from cold or fear, but from indignation. At his side, Titan remained vigilant, refusing to move away even with the presence of the police officers. "Mr. Pereira, we need your statement," said Sheriff Rachel Miller, a middle-aged woman with a firm but gentle voice. "Can you tell us exactly what happened here?" Jack took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. They broke into my house, Alan Morrison and his thugs. They wanted to force me to sign documents selling my property." The sheriff frowned, quickly taking notes. "Alan Morrison? The businessman?" "Exactly. He came to make me an offer a few days ago. When I refused, strange things started happening. The fence cut, tools disappearing, a threatening note. And you?" The sheriff turned to Frank, seated dejectedly in the corner of the kitchen. "What's your role in all this?" The young man raised his tear-filled eyes, his face a mask of shame and regret. I worked for Mr. Jack for years. Morrison approached me, offered money to help convince Mr. Jack to sell the ranch. "You accepted?" asked the sheriff. Frank nodded slowly. "At first, yes. My mother is sick, needing surgery. The money he offered would solve all our problems." Jack lowered his head, feeling the weight of betrayal. He had trusted Frank like a son, opened the doors of his home, shared his life. "But," continued Frank, "I never imagined he planned to use violence. When I realized things were getting out of control, I told my mother everything. She was the one who insisted I call the police." "Yet you came with them tonight," observed the sheriff. "Yes, I thought I could prevent them from hurting Mr. Jack, if I was present. But when I saw what they really intended—" Frank's voice faltered. The heavy silence that followed was interrupted by a police officer who hurriedly entered the kitchen. "Sheriff, we found something. You need to see." Everyone followed the officer to the living room, where another officer was examining some papers on the table. "They're fake documents," explained the officer. "Property transfer, assignment of rights, all forged. And there's more. We found in the car they abandoned a complete dossier on the property, including geological studies." "Geological studies?" questioned Jack, confused. "Yes, sir," replied the officer. "According to these documents, there's an underground spring of very high-quality mineral water beneath your land. It's worth a fortune to anyone wanting to exploit it commercially." Jack dropped into a chair, stunned by the revelation. "So that's what—" "It wasn't just for the luxury development." The sheriff quickly leafed through the documents, her face hardening as she understood the extent of the scheme. "Mr. Morrison will face serious charges: document forgery, attempted extortion, breaking and entering, attempted fraud." At that moment, the sheriff's phone rang. She answered quickly, listening attentively, before hanging up with a satisfied smile. "We just arrested Alan Morrison trying to flee at the St. Louis airport. He's not going anywhere except jail." A collective sigh of relief went through the kitchen. Titan, as if understanding that the danger had passed, visibly relaxed for the first time that night. When the police finally left, taking Frank to give a formal statement at the station, Jack was left alone with Titan on the porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the scent of wet earth in the air. The first lights of morning began to appear on the horizon. "You were right all along, weren't you, old boy?" he spoke softly, stroking the horse's neck. "You sensed the betrayal even before I suspected." Titan snorted softly, resting his muzzle on Jack's shoulder, as he had done since they first met. "But I think Frank sincerely regretted it," continued Jack. "Life sometimes puts people in impossible situations. When his mother needs help, a young man can make wrong decisions." The words of the mysterious note came back to his mind. Not all guardians are trustworthy. Now he understood its meaning. It wasn't Titan the Guardian the note was warning about, but Frank. And who could have left that warning? He might never know. The sheriff had promised to return later to provide more details about the investigation. She had also mentioned that the team would come to repair the damage done to the house. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the events, but also a strange relief. The worst had passed, and he still had his ranch, his home, and above all he had Titan. 6 months had passed since the turbulent night of the storm. Hope Ranch, once a solitary refuge for Jack and Titan, now pulsed with new energy. The sound of hooves and whinnies echoed throughout the property, mixing with the voices of visitors who came regularly. Seated in his rocking chair on the newly renovated porch, Jack smiled, hearing the bustle around him. Who could have imagined that in his 70s he would start a completely new project? "Mr. Jack, the new stall is ready," announced Ryan, one of the 3 employees now working at the ranch. "We can bring Colonel in today." "Colonel? was the newest resident of what was now called the Guardian's Refuge, a home for retired police horses. The idea had emerged weeks after the incident, when the story of how Titan had protected Jack spread and reached the ears of the Missouri State Police commander. The officer had visited the ranch personally, impressed by the bond between the elderly man and the animal. It was he who suggested that perhaps other retired horses could find a dignified home for their final years there. With part of the settlement Jack received from the lawsuit against Alan Morrison, whose conviction had been news throughout the country, the project quickly took shape. Comfortable stalls were built, fences reinforced, and a small visitation center erected so schools could bring children to meet the four-legged heroes, as Jack liked to call them. "Mr. Jack, you have a visitor," announced Helen, a retired veterinarian, who had volunteered to help care for the animals and was now a constant presence at the ranch. "Who is it?" asked Jack, turning his face toward the approaching footsteps. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jack." Frank's timid voice sounded hesitant. Jack straightened in his chair, surprised. He hadn't expected to see him so soon, despite the letters the young man had sent regularly over the past few months, all full of remorse and pleas for forgiveness. "Frank, I didn't know you were coming today. I came to bring news about my mother. The surgery was a success. She's recovering well." "I'm glad to hear that," replied Jack sincerely. An uncomfortable silence hung between them, laden with unspoken words and wounds not yet completely healed. "I also came to apologize in person. I know I wrote several letters, but I wanted to look you in the eyes. I understand," interrupted Jack with a slight smile, "and although I can't see your eyes, I can hear the sincerity in your voice." Frank took a deep breath, relieved. "I'm finishing my veterinary technician course, you know. I got a scholarship after everything that happened." "That's a good path," commented Jack. "You always had a way with animals." "Well, almost all of them." Frank laughed nervously. "Yes, except with Titan. He always knew, didn't he? From the beginning he was suspicious of me." As if having heard his name, Titan appeared trotting across the open field, majestic as ever, despite his advanced age. The horse stopped a few yards away, watching Frank attentively. "I think he still hasn't forgiven me," murmured the young man. "Titan has a good memory," replied Jack. "But he's also fair. Give him time." Almost as if understanding the conversation, Titan cautiously approached, stopping a few steps from Frank. The young man remained still, respecting the animal's space. "I'm proud of what you've done with this place, Mr. Jack," commented Frank, looking around. "The Guardian's Refuge is amazing. I've heard about it even in St. Louis." Jack nodded, his face lighting up with pride. "It was Titan who inspired me. These animals dedicated their lives to protecting people. They deserve a peaceful place to rest." At that moment, a group of children accompanied by a teacher passed by the side of the house, all excited to meet the horses. Helen was guiding them, explaining the history of each animal. "That one over there is Brave, worked in the cavalry." "For 12 years, she explained, pointing to a bay horse of elegant bearing. "And that spotted one is Thunder, a specialist in rescue in hard-to-reach areas." The children listened, fascinated, eyes wide with admiration. I should go," said Frank, standing up. "I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to fix my mistakes. Follow a better path." Jack extended his hand, which Frank shook with emotion. "People deserve second chances, son. Life is made of choices. Some good, others not so much. The important thing is to learn from them." When Frank walked away, Titan approached Jack, resting his muzzle on his shoulder, as he always did. "What do you think, old friend? Do you think he deserves another chance?" In response, Titan whinnied softly. Later that day, as the sun set on the Riverdale horizon, Jack met with Helen and the employees to discuss plans for expanding the refuge. The once lonely Hope Ranch now overflowed with life and purpose. "You know," commented Helen as they had coffee on the porch, "when you first told me your story, I thought it was just about a man and his horse facing greed. But now I see it was about much more." "Is that so?" asked Jack, interested. "And what do you think it was about?" Helen smiled, watching the horses grazing peacefully under the orange evening sky. "About how it's never too late to find a new purpose. About how sometimes we need to lose something to discover what really matters, and about how true guardians, be they human or animal, remain faithful to the end. Jack nodded, moved. Extending his hand, he found Titan's soft coat, his faithful companion, his guardian, his friend. Together they had faced betrayal and danger, and together they now built a legacy that would last far beyond their lives. Night descended gently over Hope Ranch, now truly a place of hope for all who found refuge there. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from.